Breaking news from around your world on this Thursday, March 7th, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. National Security Advisor John Bolton said Thursday that President Donald Trump is open to additional talks with Pyongyang over denuclearization, despite reports that North Korea is reactivating parts of its missile program. New activity had been detected at a factory that produced North Korea's first intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching the United States. This week, 2 U.S. think tanks and Seoul's spy agency said North Korea was rebuilding a rocket launch site, prompting Trump to say he would be very, very disappointed in Chairman Kim if it were true. Bolton, a hardliner who argued for a tough approach to North Korea in the past, said it was too soon to make a determination on the reports of the North Korean activities. The Vietnam summit in February collapsed over differences on how far North Korea was willing to limit its nuclear program and the degree of U.S. willingness to ease economic sanctions. France's senior Catholic cleric, Cardinal Philippe Barbarin, offered to resign Thursday after he was convicted of failing to report a known pedophile priest to police, the latest high-ranking churchman to fall in the global reckoning over clergy sex abuse and cover-ups. In an unexpected decision, magistrates in Lyon found that Barbarin had an obligation to report Reverend Bernard Prénat to civil authorities and gave the cardinal a 6-month suspended prison sentence. Prénat, who is scheduled to be tried on sexual violence charges next year, has confessed to abusing Boy Scouts in the 1970s and 80s. People who said they were among the victims accused Barbarin and other church officials of covering up the priest's crimes for years. 9 victims brought the case to trial. A group of Prénat's victims hailed the unanticipated conviction as a victory for child protection and a strong signal that church leaders will be held accountable. 5 co-defendants, an archbishop, a bishop, a priest, and 2 other officials, were acquitted. The battle against Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo is failing because ordinary people do not trust health workers, and an overly militarized response is alienating patients and families. Last week, Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders, suspended medical activities at the focal point of the epidemic after 2 of its facilities were torched by unidentified assailants. MSF's international president, Joanne Liu, said the outbreak, which has killed 569 people, would not be beaten unless the community trusted the authorities and were treated humanely. Liu told reporters in Geneva Ebola responders were increasingly seen as the enemy, with more than 30 attacks and incidents against the Ebola response in the past month alone. She said using police to force people into complying with health measures is not only unethical, it's totally counterproductive. Liu said there were still signs the outbreak, the second worst ever, was not being brought under control. 40% of deaths were outside medical centers, meaning patients had not sought care, and 35% of new patients were not linked to existing cases, meaning the spread of the disease was not being tracked. The government of embattled Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro expelled Germany's ambassador and detained a U.S. freelance journalist in its latest clash with the international community. The journalist, Cody Weddle, was arrested in a military counterintelligence raid on his home in Caracas and reportedly faces deportation Thursday. The ambassador, Daniel Kreiner, was among the U.S., Latin American, and European diplomats who on Monday met opposition leader Juan Guaido at Caracas airport to help him avoid arrest when he returned to the country after a 10-day trip abroad. Venezuela considers it unacceptable that a foreign diplomat carries out in its territory a public role closer to that of a political leader aligned with the conspiratorial agenda of extremist sectors of the Venezuelan opposition, the Maduro government said. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Thursday the House will vote on a resolution condemning anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, white supremacy, and other forms of hate after freshman Representative Ilhan Omar's comments about Israel sparked turmoil among Democrats. The move was, in part, intended to resolve a divide that opened up after Omar said that Israel's supporters were pushing lawmakers to take a pledge of allegiance to a foreign country. As a Muslim American, she has been critical of the Jewish state in the past and apologized for those previous comments. But Omar has not apologized for what many in Congress saw as a suggestion that Israel's supporters have split loyalties. That sparked a demand from some quarters to put a resolution on the floor condemning anti-Semitism. Pelosi says she does not believe the Minnesota Democrat understood the weight of her words or that they would be perceived by some as anti-Semitic. The resolution won't mention Omar by name. A hardline cleric, once thought to be a possible successor to Iran's supreme leader, was appointed head of the Islamic Republic's judiciary Thursday, sparking concern from rights activists over his involvement in the execution of thousands in the 1980s. Ibrahim Raisi was named to the post in a decree by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The semi-official Fars news agency reports Raisi's selection comes after he was trounced by incumbent Hassan Rouhani in the country's 2017 presidential election. That loss, as well as other concerns, now have analysts suggesting the move takes him out of the running to become the next supreme leader to replace Khamenei, who will turn 80 this July. International rights groups estimate that as many as 30,000 prisoners were executed in 1988 at the end of Iran's long war with Iraq. Iran has never fully acknowledged the executions, apparently carried out on orders from Iran's supreme leader at the time, Ayatollah Khomeini, though some argue that other top officials were effectively in charge in the months before Khomeini's 1989 death. Raisi reportedly served on a panel involved in sentencing the prisoners to death. Britain's government is still hopeful it can secure a Brexit breakthrough with the European Union this weekend, ahead of a key parliamentary vote on Prime Minister Theresa May's deal next week, according to Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt on Thursday. With only 22 days before Britain is due to leave the EU, May has yet to get her deal passed by Britain's deeply divided parliament, raising doubts and further uncertainty over Brexit, the country's biggest shift in policy in more than 40 years. May is struggling to convince the EU to agree to changes to the so-called Irish backstop, an insurance policy to prevent a hard border between the UK province of Northern Ireland and EU member Ireland if a future trading relationship falls short. Talks this week, led by Attorney General Geoffrey Cox, failed to secure EU agreement, with officials in Brussels criticizing the British side's proposals and telling May's top lawyer to rework them and come back on Friday. One UK government source said with the EU showing no signs of moving in the talks, there was little hope anything could change over the next 48 hours, raising doubts over whether May can win support for her deal in next Tuesday's big vote. Embattled Chinese tech giant Huawei said Thursday it had filed a Texas lawsuit against the U.S. government, challenging a ban on its products. The National Defense Authorization Act prohibits federal agencies and contractors from purchasing equipment made by Huawei and another Chinese company, ZTE Corporation. This ban not only is unlawful, but also restricts Huawei from engaging in fair competition, ultimately harming U.S. consumers, according to a statement by Huawei Deputy Chair Guo Ping. The lawsuit is the most aggressive move to date by Huawei against allegations from the Trump administration that its equipment can be used to spy for China. The U.S. considers Huawei a security threat and wants to keep it from building 5G networks worldwide. South Korea's government said Thursday it will push to team up with China to take emergency measures on reducing fine dust. Environment Minister Cho Myung-rae announced the government's special measures to fight fine dust pollution, said Seoul will ask Beijing to conduct a joint artificial rain experiment over the sea between the two countries this year to help reduce dust levels in the region. Zhou and his Chinese counterpart Li Ganjie held talks in Beijing February 26th and agreed to exchange weather forecast information and technology to establish an early warning system for fine dust. The two ministers also agreed to exchange artificial rain technologies and to conduct joint research on the origins of air pollutants and reducing fine dust pollution in Northeast Asia. Seoul also plans to hold a joint workshop with Beijing during the first half of this year to discuss ways to share meteorological information in relation to the move to establish an early warning system. Jeopardy host Alex Trebek announced that he has been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The 78-year-old Canadian native said, "Now, normally the prognosis for this is not very encouraging, but I'm going to fight this and I'm going to keep working. And with the love and support of my family and friends and with the help of your prayers also, I plan to beat the low survival rate statistics for this disease." Trebek has hosted the popular quiz show since 1984, presiding over nearly 8,000 episodes, a record for a quiz show host. He's won 5 Daytime Emmy Awards as Outstanding Game Show Host. And that's your update for this Thursday, March 7th, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.